Hello everyone, welcome to the series summarizing the novel Lord of the Mysteries on the AniMonolith channel. In previous parts, the Nighthawks, along with Klein, used sealed artifact 2-049, a grotesque puppet, to track Ray Bieber's location, leading them to a warehouse near the docks. Upon arrival, they face intense resistance from a mysterious clown-like beyonder who distracts them with illusions, real gunfire, and flame-based attacks. The clown's strange abilities and another similarly painted accomplice reveal their connection to the secret order, highlighting the bizarre nature of their sequence pathway. During the confrontation, the clown distracts the Nighthawks while his accomplice attempts to retrieve the Antigonus family's notebook hidden in the warehouse. A horrifying scream from deep within the warehouse halts the action, creating an eerie silence and triggering violent activity from sealed artifact 2-049 in its iron chest. Using this distraction, the jester-like beyonder frees himself. The jester moved with lightning speed, and in a flash, only his retreating figure remained. Just before disappearing, he switched his right hand, which had been clutching his abdomen, to his left. The wound on his belly vanished, fully healed, but now his left hand was bloody, with a silver bullet lodged inside. The jester had transferred the injury to his hand to move more freely. Seeing this, Dunn and the others did not pursue him. Suddenly, the warehouse door exploded, sending fragments flying everywhere. A torn, cloth-wrapped object was flung out, landing close to Klein. Looking closely, he realized it was an arm, its muscles mangled and torn, with white bone protruding from the fractures. More body parts followed, blood, an eye with a dilated pupil, a severed ear, a still-beating heart, and entrails filled with a yellow-brown substance. If Klein hadn't encountered the even more horrifying giant's gaze at Ray Bieber's house, he would have been overcome with nausea. Amid this grotesque and eerie scene, Dunn calmly fired a shot into the warehouse, but it disappeared into the void, without a single echo. The sounds of heavy breathing grew louder and more frantic, as gray-white vapor seeped from the dismembered parts, filling the shattered doorway. Harson and Borja fired, but their bullets passed through the gray fog without leaving a mark or slowing its advance. Realizing the situation was dire, Klein stopped firing blindly and instead observed as the gray mist revealed its true form. It was a humanoid creature, standing over 2 meters tall. All the joints in its limbs were grotesquely twisted, as if they had been broken and reset incorrectly. Its outer gray-white skin was wrinkled like a peeled human brain. The creature oozed a foul-smelling, sticky gray fluid from its body. Strangely enough, its head was fairly normal, with distinct wrinkles and pale skin. Its mouth opened and closed, revealing a porcelain dental crown about to fall off. The sight of this crown made Klein immediately suspect that the creature was Ray Bieber. In that moment, Leonard fired his demon-hunting bullet, piercing Ray Bieber's forehead and leaving a deep hole. Gray fluid poured out, falling to the ground and transforming into white, maggot-like worms. But the creature showed no signs of stopping and lunged at Lorata, the closest target. Its true aim was the black iron chest containing sealed artifact 2049. Sensing the urgency, Dunn ordered Lorata, "Find its weakness, it looks like an undead creature. It's out of control with beyonder power." Lorata quickly followed the command, covering her eyes with her hand. Her pupils turned a dull gray-white, as though she had entered the spirit world, seeing the realm of the undead. She looked down at the enemy from a higher plane, searching for the crucial weakness that would end Ray Bieber. Seeing their bullets were ineffective, Klein stopped wasting ammunition. He tapped his glabella to open his spirit vision, intending to assist Gravedigger Lorata. In Klein's view, the monster Ray Bieber's aura was entirely gray-white, filled with madness. Meanwhile, Harson and Leonard Mitchell began to chant a verse, unleashing a power that made all living things fall asleep. The gray-white creature began to slow down, unable to resist the effect of the poem. But just then, it let out a piercing, otherworldly scream that was unbearable to normal ears. After the scream, Klein, Leonard, and Harson all began bleeding from their eyes, noses, and mouths. Borja, Dunn, and Lorata, with their higher sequence levels, turned pale but remained standing. The creature lashed out at Borja with its twisted limbs, sending him flying and causing his long-barreled revolver to clatter to the ground. Though he tried to stand, he couldn't get up right away. Meanwhile, the gray-white monster rushed toward the black iron chest. In the nick of time, Harson shot the chest, sending it sliding out of reach by another 10 meters. The chest, however, now showed a crack, and the pounding inside grew louder and stronger. In the tense moment, Lorata shouted that she had found Bieber's weakness and needed him restrained for at least 3 seconds. Dunn immediately agreed, pressing his glabella and closing his eyes as if falling into a deep sleep. Invisible waves rippled outward, and in an instant, the gray-white creature froze, its crazed expression disappearing. Loretta seized the opportunity, darting forward and rolling under Ray Bieber's monstrous form. She punched the creature in the groin like a bullet, even though her hand burned as if it were being corroded. With all her strength, she drove her fist deeper. Pulling back her hand, she yanked out a mess of yellow-brown entrails and blackened blood, within which was an ancient-looking notebook. The creature shrieked in agony as its body began to dissolve into light. At that moment, Harson shouted a warning for everyone to duck. In the ensuing explosion, Klein was thrown back by the shockwave, landing hard on the ground. He saw Dunn and Loretta lying unconscious a dozen meters away, while Harson, Borja, and Leonard groaned in pain, struggling to get up. Klein felt some relief knowing they were still alive, but his attention quickly shifted to the black iron chest, which now had a visible crack, from which a small brown hand was protruding. The explosion had sent the chest close to Klein's position, and panic set in as he realized he was about to be controlled by sealed artifact 2049. Everything around him seemed to slow down, and his joints became sluggish. Klein had no desire to become a puppet, so he acted quickly before the artifact took full control. Since the Nighthawks members were all incapacitated, Klein thought of using external help to save himself. In his current state, he lacked the strength to strike his own body hard enough to free himself. Klein instinctively followed a hunch, moving his knee in slow, rusty steps counterclockwise. At the same time, despite the sensation of being choked, he murmured the incantation of his fate-changing ritual, hoping to call upon the mysterious world above the gray fog to wake himself and avoid being assimilated by sealed artifact 2049. His thoughts became slower and more rigid, and he relied solely on instinct to take the final step. After a difficult struggle, Klein knew he was almost fully under the artifact's control. Even if Harson managed to stand and come to his rescue, there was no way to wake him. But the intense desire to survive drove Klein to finish the final line of his fate-changing incantation. As he did, chaotic, maddening whispers filled the air, breaking through the frozen state of Klein's mind. His thoughts began to clear, and he found himself once again standing in the familiar grand, majestic temple of the mysterious world above the gray fog. From his experience, Klein understood that falling too deeply under the control of sealed artifact 2049 meant certain death. Fortunately, the fate-changing ritual and the mysterious world beyond the gray fog were outside the realm of ordinary logic, allowing Klein to escape the deadly situation. However, new complications quickly arose. Klein realized that his current condition resembled an out-of-body experience. If the other Beyonder members awoke and found his body motionless, then saw him suddenly regain consciousness, it would be hard to explain how he had escaped the terrifying power of the sealed artifact, but if Klein returned to his body now, he would once again fall under the control of 2-049. At that moment, Klein suddenly remembered that he was a seer, and as such, he could find the most suitable course of action in such a critical situation. So, Klein calmly sat down in the chair, extended his hand to grab the fountain pen that had materialized from thin air, and wrote a sentence on the illusory sheet of paper: "I returned to the real world safely." Immediately afterward, Klein pulled the projection of his dowsing pendulum from his pocket. Through several gatherings, he had discovered that anything he carried on him could appear on the gray fog, though they would become somewhat ethereal. After repeating the note, which reflected what he wanted to know, Klein used the dowsing method to perform divination. When Klein opened his eyes, he saw the yellow quartz pendulum swaying slowly, pulling the silver chain to rotate clockwise. Clockwise meant yes, counterclockwise meant no. Thus, it was safe for Klein to return to the real world. Without hesitation, Klein used his spiritual power to envelop himself, and then imagine himself falling downward. Instantly, the endless gray fog and the dark red stars became blurry. Klein found himself standing in the same spot as before, noticing that the puppet 2-049 was halfway out of the iron chest, but all of its movements had suddenly ceased. As Klein prepared to move his arm to assess his condition, a voice, blending with the wind and sounding both real and illusory, echoed in his ears. It offered him salvation in exchange for retrieving the Antigonos family notebook and urged him to nod if he agreed, it knowing he could manage that small gesture. Upon hearing this strange voice, Klein realized that sealed artifact 2-049 no longer had control over him. He recalled the knowledge shared earlier, that the sealed artifact's influence wouldn't be continuous but would have intervals. Recognizing this, Klein stabilized his emotions, trying to act as though nothing unusual had happened so the stranger wouldn't notice. The voice spoke again, unexpectedly offering a further reward. It revealed knowledge of Klein's identity as a seer and pointed out that the Church of the Evernight Goddess lacked the Sequence 8 potion for that pathway. The voice claimed that the secret order could provide it, adding that the voice owner had once been a seer itself. As proof of sincerity, it disclosed that the Sequence 8 corresponding to seer was called Clown. Hearing this information from the unidentified secret order member, Klein was utterly shocked. He hadn't imagined that seer and clown would be connected. While he was processing this, the stranger continued urging him to make a decision quickly, as time was running out. Not far away, although Dunn and Lorada were still unconscious, and Borja was severely injured and groaning without moving, Harson and Leonard Mitchell seemed to be in better shape. Both were trying to get up. Although the stranger couldn't fully assess the situation, Klein immediately made some deductions. If this member of the secret order could break free from the sealed artifact's control, they could easily handle the heavily injured Nighthawks. Therefore, there was no logical reason why Klein would be chosen for the task of retrieving the notebook. Klein then began using the thought process of a seer to analyze the situation. Since the stranger had admitted to being a former seer, it was certain they had similar abilities in handling such situations. First, the reason for returning to this place was likely that the stranger had foreseen hope, believing that the monster Bieber would be defeated and that Klein's group would be seriously injured. The fact that the jester wasn't retrieving the notebook himself or dealing with the group directly probably indicated that he had foreseen great danger in doing so, suspecting that Dunn and Lorada were only pretending to be unconscious, waiting to trap him. The jester hadn't divined more or confirmed Klein's current state, likely because time was short. If he waited too long, Harson and the others would recover their strength. Moreover, he probably underestimated Klein, deeming it unnecessary to divine his condition. The jester knew seers well and undoubtedly believed Klein couldn't escape the puppet's control with just his abilities. Therefore, he was trying to exploit Klein, making him the sacrifice to test the trap. Thinking from another perspective, Klein realized that this indicated that the fate exchange ritual appeared nearly undetectable to outsiders in its external manifestations. After reasoning things out, Klein roughly grasped the jester's intentions and objectives. As for the promises made by the jester and the tailcoat, Klein didn't trust them at all. A sudden idea sparked in his mind, and he began to slowly move his neck, making a nodding gesture. While doing this, Klein fully understood that he had escaped the control of the sealed artifact 2-049. As soon as Klein nodded, the jester in the tailcoat, the same secret order member who had fled earlier, revealed himself from a short distance away. This jester, with his face painted, quickly pulled a long piece of paper out of his pocket and shook it forcefully, transforming it into a wooden staff. He extended the staff toward Klein's shoulder from a distance of about 2 to 3 meters, the necessary distance to avoid the influence of the sealed artifact within the iron chest. Seeing this action, Klein could confirm that the jester had a deep understanding of 2-049. He knew that wherever the scent of the Antigono's descendants lingered, the puppet would become frenzied, enhancing its power to the point of controlling 2 people simultaneously. Though Klein wasn't sure why the puppet hadn't continued its controlling behavior, he remained extremely cautious, waiting for the right moment to deal with the jester. Just as the jester's staff, which had transformed from a piece of paper, was about to touch Klein's shoulder, Klein quickly raised his left hand, grabbed the staff's head, and yanked it backward. Caught off guard, the jester stumbled forward, closing the distance between him and Klein to less than 2 meters. At the same time, Klein, already prepared, swiftly pulled the trigger of his revolver. Klein fired twice in quick succession, but not at the jester in the tailcoat. Instead, he aimed at one side of the sealed artifact 2-049, which had already moved away from the jester. Sensing the danger, the jester immediately dodged Klein's attack. Klein quickly released the staff, which had turned back into paper, and dashed out of the danger zone. As the jester rolled twice, attempting to flee farther away, his mind and thoughts suddenly slowed down. When he realized he had fallen under the control of the puppet, a puzzling thought crossed his mind: why wasn't Klein, who was within the same range, affected? By this point, Klein had turned around, both hands gripping his revolver, aiming directly at the jester, who was moving in slow motion. Having witnessed the jester's agility and skill in rolling during his battle with Dunn, Harson, and Lorada, Klein had deduced that his opponent was nimble and adept at escaping. Even though the distance between them was just over 2 meters, Klein cautiously abandoned the idea of shooting directly. Instead, he aimed to force the jester to flee toward the sealed artifact 2-049. In the jester's indescribable gaze, Klein calmly pulled the trigger, successfully executing his clever plan.